Hi everybody, I'm Mason, and this is Return to Dust.
We still need money!
Archspire, the technical death metal band, announced their new album number 5. And along with that, they made the announcement that they were going independent.
So going independent means that we have to do everything ourselves, from where we're getting our CDs printed, our vinyl, everything.
Archspire began in 2007 under the name Defenestrated, which might be the most underground name ever because even the infamous Metal Archives did not provide me with a logo. So needless to say, I was a little disappointed, but we will carry on nonetheless. In 2009, they changed their name to Archspire, and they've been going ever since. They're a Canadian technical death metal band. Technical death metal is death metal taken to its ultimate conclusion. Fast-paced. It's a lot more musical on one hand. There's a lot more musicianship, and it is incredibly niche. There's no doubt about that. Archspire decided to go independent from their record label, Season of Mist, which they recorded and released their last 3 albums with. So after they released 3 albums with Season of Mist, they decided to go their own way.
So we want to break free of that cycle. We want to do everything ourselves, take all of that stuff in our own hands, and we need your help to do it.
And we want to own our own music, because we make our music, but we don't really own it.
Maybe people don't know that. It's like when you work with a label, you're technically giving away the music that you wrote. You're selling it. I mean, you do get an advance for the album, and you get all this other support, but you don't get the album back.
As a metal musician who's had a few run-ins with smaller labels, granted we're nowhere on the size of Season of Mist, it is far better. It is far more freeing to just be able to control your own stuff, even if there is, like they say, a lot more risk. It's far more rewarding and you get a lot more out of it. The reason I'm making this video is that a lot of people seem to have concerns for the amount that the band plans to use for their album. In the video, they opted to show their budget for the album. And the amount that they were attempting to raise was $125,000, which is nothing to scoff at for a regular band, but for a technical death metal band, that is incredibly, it seems to be incredibly high. And I wouldn't say, I would almost say, venture to say unprecedented. What I do appreciate is that they provided their receipts of what exactly the money is going towards, what it is allotted to, and all of that. What I decided to do is we would go through each account today and look through exactly what they're going for and talk generally about what that would look like for people who are interested, because a lot of people seem to be skeptical about how much these things actually cost, and that there's a lot more cheaper avenues to approach. And so what we're going to do today is address that and attempt to calm some people's nerves. Now keep in mind, a lot of my perspective on certain things here will be from a much smaller band's standpoint. For those who don't know who I am, my name is Mason. I am the drummer of Symphony of Heaven, a melodic death metal band based out of Evansville, Indiana. The band started in 2017, and I joined officially as the drummer in 2018, so I've been in the band for about 7 years now. So in that time, learned a lot. We've decided to be as professional as possible for a band that can't really tour at this moment in time. However, with that in mind, we are not what you would consider a local band. We are wanting to be as professional as possible with as limited resources as we can muster. With that in mind, a lot of these perspectives are going to be a lower step down from what Archspire's current standings are in the scene. I'll throw that little bit of perspective in, that little piece of information in before we get too deep into the weeds here. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
So as you can see here, the best way I figured to do this would be to make my own sheet instead of switching back and forth between the video's budget and mine just to compare notes. I decided to take everything here and put it into this sheet. You'll notice a couple things are a little different, but that's just because I added these together. I added everything over here that said that was the same categories over here, like first and second payments I added together. I added the flights, studio time, accommodations, expenses, all that. So everything is here. I double-checked it. I also made the point to organize these things by legend. So the green represents paid, yellow half paid, and the red represents...
I am once again asking for your financial support.
Now that that's out of the way, let's start with recording costs. Now, this is the only secondary page I made for it, and that was simply because I think it's gonna, this one's gonna require a bit of examination for most people, I think. As a musician myself, it's always been a dream of mine to record at a studio with any of my bands, but the reality of it is not what you would call cost-effective for a band who's independent, unless you have big backing like these guys managed to raise, which we'll look over the final numbers of what they managed to raise and all what all that means here momentarily. Let's start here with Dave Otero. So Dave Otero would be the engineer, the producer, mixing and mastering engineer as well for this album, and if I recall, he's done at least the last 2 albums. I know he did Relentless Mutation. I'm pretty certain he did Bleed the Future as well. So they like working with Dave Otero. As far as other bands he's done, I'm only aware of Cattle Decapitation that he's worked with, but obviously I'm certain there's other big bands as well. So, Aborted. That's a big one. Allegiant, he's done a lot of work with them. Shadow of Intent, I believe I saw earlier. Yeah, see Cattle. Cephalic Carnage. That's not a name you hear much anymore. Love that band. Dath. A lot of one-offs, that sort of thing. I don't know who Chemist is, but he's done a lot of work with them. Satan's Host. Scorched. Shadow of Intent. Okay, I'm not crazy. I thought I saw that. Zenith Passage. So anyways, you can see, and this is just Metal Archives. This isn't probably his full discography, but it's a pretty good approximation of what it would be. Basically, from what I saw here, the earliest he had started was 2001 as an engineer. He's obviously been active as a musician since long before that. I saw as far back as 1999. He's been doing this for a hot minute, and he's pretty damn good at what he does, because obviously you don't get this many bands on your resume without being a very solid engineer or producer, frankly. So he knows what he's up to. I went searching for his website to see if I could find rates specific to his site, and he sent his Facebook page sent me to this site here. On this site here, it lists all his credits. You can see here that he's regarded as the top 0.1% of producers and the top 1% of mixing engineers. Notably, it doesn't say anything about mastering engineers, which is interesting because he's doing that as well, but I took note of those things as well just to point out the fact that Archspire has made a point to say that they are going for the best of the best. They're trying to make sure that this album is as good as possible, and so I think that's highly reflected in their choice of engineer. As it were, that seems to cost a lot of money. For both sessions, it's $14,350. Total, $28,700. And from what Dean said in his response video, which I believe I have clipped, the band was there for 9 weeks, and that included mixing and mastering.
Another example would be going to Dave Otero for recording the album. It includes us flying there. It includes us, our living expenses while we're there, and then it includes his rate as a producer for, I think, 9 weeks in the studio, mixing and mastering included.
That seems pretty on point. In fact, if anything, that seems like a very good deal for all of that included. $28,700 it seems high to the average person, but for a musician that's actually, or for a professional musician, that seems to be pretty level. So many bands go into the studio and they'll put in a crazy amount of money just from doing that. Most of the cost comes from mixing, mastering, and the studio. So what I did find interesting, we'll get to these in a minute, while doing research for this video, I listened to an episode of the URM podcast that had Dean Lamb and Dave Otero both on it, and they mentioned that they had recorded Relentless Mutation within the span of 5 weeks. If they did the same thing for this album, which I get the impression that they may have, they would spend 5 weeks recording and likely another 4 weeks of mixing mastering. That's just speculation. That's not proven. All I do know is that Dean claimed that they paid for 9 weeks, including mixing and mastering for this album number 5, and that both Dave and Dean said that Relentless Mutation was recorded in 5 weeks. Now, that was with a lot of additional work in the evenings, preparing for the next day, off the clock kind of thing. Right after that, you got studio accommodations. This is possibly the most vague expense in the entire budget sheet. I'm not positive as to what this means, because living expenses is fairly high. Living expenses makes me think hotel, or hotel rooms, and all the things that go along with that. Studio accommodations, I broke it down per member and per week to see like what that would look like. And I'm still not sure as to what studio accommodations was. At first, I was thinking like groceries and things like that and meals, but $72 a week for food in today's world, I don't know about that. Unless it's not impossible. You can live off that for a week. And I guess one guy per, whatever. Maybe that's what it is. That is my educated guess for studio accommodation. Since living expenses is significantly higher, that would be my assumption. So my assumption here, food and hotel, or Airbnb, or whatever that would be. Studio musician fees. This one's fascinating because, frankly, we don't really know anything about this album as far as who would be on it. My initial speculation was this fee was going towards Spencer Moore, the band's new drummer. I don't know what to think about this. Unless they have guest vocalists or guest musicians on in additional areas, they probably each had to pay a particular fee for each. And I do know quite a few going rates. My band Symphony of Heaven has looked into going rates for artists who would like to do guest vocals and things of that nature. And in my experience, they run between $500 and $1,500. This is not unlikely. I'm sure the higher up it goes, it's probably according to their budget. What they have paid already was $5,100, and what they had left over, additional studio musician fees, was an additional $3,000. The $5,100, my guess is that was Spencer's initial fee for recording the album, and then the additional $3,000 is probably going to some guest vocalist or additional guest musicians of some variety. That would be the first 3 here, as well as the studio musician fee, which is right here. Flight's pretty self-explanatory. I'm not even going to try and go into detail on that. Seems like a lot of money, but that's 5 guys shipping gear, more than likely back and forth between Canada and Colorado, which is where Otero's studio is. So that one makes sense to me. A lot of money. Album artwork is going to be a bit shocking. $2,332. It's pretty middle of the road, honestly. I do know smaller bands who have paid very close to that amount for really good artwork. And granted, those bands are gone now. It's pretty close to what I've heard is like going rate for a lot of things. So that number isn't very shocking. I will say, up here in the corner, I have my own band's, our last album's budget. When it says budget, that's probably a bit of a misnomer. What it more or less is just tracking our expenses and what we actually paid to put out. So this is kind of the gist. This is for album artwork, we only ended up paying $600 to Timon Kakat. I would highly recommend his work. He does excellent work. I'll show a picture of what he did for us and potentially a few others in the video. Album artwork, that's pretty standard from the big names. If I could figure out who did the artwork, I don't think that was mentioned in any of the videos. That would give me a better idea. T-shirt designs, 2,000, anywhere between 4 or 5 designs specifically for the t-shirts. If that's only 2 designs, that'd be weird. That'd be a lot of money for 2 designs, but I guess not impossible. T-shirts, Quantity of 750. That's 7,500. So it's about $10 a shirt. That's pretty on point. Now, most of the time, these are going to be sold for $20, $25 dollars. Actually, with Archspire, I don't even know. That might be like more like 30 upwards. At a certain level, you got to make a lot of money on the road. A behind-the-scenes documentary. This one is possibly one of the more interesting ones, and I'm not surprised. I think more bands probably should do this sort of thing while in the studio, because one, I guarantee you this is going to give them social media content for potentially years. $6,000. If this is for 9 weeks of work, right? That's okay. That seems about right. I've worked with a few videographers in the past, and they tend to charge crazy amounts for like one day at a time. So 9 weeks, and every day for 9 weeks, okay. You convinced me enough. I'm not going into work visas. I don't know anything about that. But I don't know anything about that. I'm going to take that at face value. Now, the lyric book artwork and then the lyric book. Let's talk about that for a minute. So apparently, what they decided to do was kind of do this graphic novel that is inspired from the lyrics for this album.
We're gonna have like almost like a graphic novel book of short stories that inspired the album lyrics, written by yours truly. It's gonna come with a lot of really cool pictures.
First, when I saw lyric book, I'm thinking the internal booklet that comes with most CDs, right? That's what my initial thought was, because I don't think I've ever seen a band sell a separate sheet of lyric booklets. I've never seen that being sold separate, so that's my understanding of what that would be on this. That's right here, 300 units, because I was thinking, why would you sell a lyric book for CDs separate? So that's my understanding of what that is. It's the graphic novel that's referred to later in this video. The artwork, we've kind of touched on this. I don't think most people understand how expensive artists can be when it comes to this sort of thing. Especially the higher end. The reality of it is, you can go on Fiverr and find somebody who's going to do very close, very similar work for a fraction of that price. A fraction of that price, frankly. I could go on Fiverr right now and find somebody who charges this amount. You know? Of course, I understand their points in that they want to do the best. They want to hire the best and have the best people for the job. For a smaller band, don't think there's anything wrong with going with somebody smaller than what these guys are charging. If anything, what you should be is financially conservative in some ways and financially frugal in others. This is the kind of stuff that you don't need a graphic novel if you're a band that nobody knows about. That's the reality of the matter. Like album artwork, yeah, you want to put some money into that. Between $500 and probably about $2,500. You want it to pop. You want people to pay attention to your album. You want to get people's interest. It's the same with YouTube thumbnails or the intro to a really good movie. You know, it's the hook. That's what album artwork is for people. That's where you invest your time and you invest your money. It's album artwork, the first song on your record, that sort of thing. Lyric books and lyric book artwork, you can do this like if you were to do a graphic novel because it was important to your band or your concept of your band or whatever. This is probably pretty close, I'll admit, for $300. I didn't do the math, but let's try it real quick. So that would be about $8 per graphic novel, per book. That seems pretty reasonable for like a wholesale price. So that I 100% buy. Artwork, a little crazy for something like that, but whatever. That's their call. Album layout. What this basically means is the pictures within the booklet as well as the backlining of the CD, as well as the CD. Every CD nowadays, anyways, has that secondary artwork that's kind of thrown about on the physical disc itself. This is also for cassette tapes and vinyl. Actually, if anything, that's kind of cheap. $1,000 for all of that? Yeah, that's not bad at all. Because those are totally separate layouts for each one. Now we're getting to the big one. some of the big ones. Band photos for $2,500. Dean covered this in his response video. I think he did a pretty good job of explaining exactly what's going into it.
Let's take, for example, Alex Morgan, who we are hiring to do photography. In the budget, we have his cost as $2,500 US. So people look at this and go, holy shit, $2,500 for photos? You know, you could just get somebody who's almost as good and no one would know the difference and pay them $200. First off, his rate isn't $2,500 necessarily. That whole thing breaks down to his rate, the flights to bring him in, it's 2 or 3 days of accommodations, vehicle rental, probably an assistant to be hired. He's doing location scouting. Like, that stuff adds up so fucking quickly that $2,500 is like, yeah, okay, that's actually fair.
He did make a point to say something I thought was a little inconsiderate as far as people's knowledge in when it comes to music and when it comes to being in a band.
Other bands just record in their room or they record at home and they save all the money. You know, why can't this band go and do that? Or why can't, instead of hiring a professional photographer, you know, find somebody that's like, you know, just as good in their opinion and just pay them $200 and do that. I think that all that stuff is fair if you are really ignorant about how a band works.
Because the reality of it is most people don't know. You could 100% get photos done for $200, $300, right? You could probably do it for less. I get his point that you want to be the best. You want to set high standards. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly reasonable. There was no real reason to be like condescending about it. I get that it's important, but it came off as a little petulant, a little entitled. But I ain't trying to be rude when I say that. That's just how it came off. It is what it is. $2,500 for band photos. PR, marketing, and advertising. $15,000. That actually brought a smile to my face in a way that I cannot express. Most bands will never succeed because nobody knows who the hell they are. That's the reality of it. These are the things that are vitally important to making sure that your band is discovered. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, you don't really need PR as a small band, because all that does is it gets you articles on... It'll get you articles in online magazines and stuff like that. And the argument is that nobody's going to look at the small bands in the big magazines. It's a fair argument, but at the same time, it is valuable nonetheless. Nobody's looking for it, but if they see your name and they're like, oh, maybe I'll check that out, it's incredibly valuable. Marketing is incredibly valuable. Knowing how to reach your audience, knowing exactly who your audience is, all those things. And then advertising, which is putting the money down. Well, there's a million ways you can advertise now. My guess is probably like brand or influencers, not brand ambassadors, influencers, and a lot of digital marketing is more than likely where they're going to spend their focus. Potentially, like magazines like Decibel will also be, or Revolver will also be pretty valuable for advertising. So $15,000 is actually it's pretty good. That's not what a small band should be spending their money on, but for a band that's been around for almost 20 years or at least 15 years, that's not bad. It's a pretty good place to be, especially for being top of the technical death metal realm, as it were. Music videos, $30,000. This isn't that crazy compared. Nobody really. I don't think anybody complained about the previous music videos that they did, because I'm pretty sure they were even more expensive than that. So when I was talking about videographers earlier, music videos are astronomically expensive, even though it's not like how it was back in the day where they set up like these huge elaborate sets and they have like these Hollywood actors just happen to be in the music video. Those days are gone where the big actors are in the band's videos like that. So $30,000 is probably, I don't even know if that's in the ballpark of what that would used to be, but I'm pretty sure they spent more on their previous videos, which their videos are excellent. If you haven't watched them, I'd highly recommend them. Lyric videos being $750. If they're only doing one lyric video, which they might not. It does say video. Oh no, it says video as in singular. So that's 100% the going rate for that sort of thing. I believe we had a lyric video done one time, and I think we paid around 300, 400. Friend of our guitarist sort of thing. So that's probably about right, honestly. 750 bucks. That's not terrible. Vinyl Productions, 1,250. Let's do the math real quick. What is that per unit? 20 bucks per record. Ooh, that seems a little steep unless they have a double vinyl planned. My band has looked at small runs of 100 at a time, and it's always over $1,000. So I guess multiply that by a large factor there. Almost yeah, I'm not that good at math. I'm not going to do that in my head or embarrass myself. But anyways, $20 per record. My guess is that either their album is long enough that it's a double record, or no, that's my guess. I don't have a second opinion. That's what I'm guessing, and hopefully that'll make sense to you the way I'm explaining these things, and I'm not just rambling. CD Productions, I'm going to provide a little bit more insight. So let's look at this here. So that's $5.08 per CD. That is 100% what it should be. That I can say without a doubt is pretty accurate. For our album, this is what it was for us. About $4.98 per CD. We only ordered 100 at a time. At 100 units, that's about $500. A little over. $508. So that's 100% right. The rest of these pins at $2 a pin is kind of crazy, I gotta say. I think most of the time I've seen pins at I guess I haven't seen their pins, the Staytech pins, which is what I'm assuming are Archspire pins. They're probably pretty solid. But man, $2 a pin, that's kind of nuts, in all honesty. Yeah, okay. That's pretty reasonable. That's on point. So those two are on point. $2. Yeah, okay, so $3 per poster. Wall flags, I don't really have a metric for. $7? Yeah. As a wholesale per unit, that makes perfect sense. That is what the total of these expenses are. And I double-checked these numbers. I'm certain they're correct. That is what the total of these numbers are. And the reason I make that distinction is I believe they rounded some of these numbers up. I added these two figures together. So this is the amount paid, and this is the amount left to raise. And you can see these here in the video. Here's what I found. That sum adds up to $173,200. So between that sum and the total costs of what's highlighted here, there is a $4,023 discrepancy. My guess is that's just an accounting error on their part. I don't think there's anything malicious behind this or anything to that effect. I will get into what I think this is here in a minute, but that was just something I noticed and I wanted to point out. So this is what all this adds up to, and the figures they gave us, that's what this adds up to. This is the amount of money that they ended up raising in 12 hours, no less. That's incredible. That's impressive. Good for them. I made a point to say that technical death metal is rather small, and so did Dean, but I mean, they had nearly 3,000 backers, and they raised that much money. Maybe it's not as small as we think. I guess 3,000's not a crazy number, but I mean, $240,675, that ain't nothing to scoff at. Any band would kill to have that, just at their disposal. Of what we're asking, $173,200. Looking at it, they raised, in addition to what they were asking, $67,475. One thing I should note is Kickstarter. Kickstarter takes a pretty big fee. This is where I believe this extra $4,000 came into play in case they didn't meet their goal. So let's look into this. So Kickstarter takes 5% of all campaigns, regardless, I believe, of if they reach their amount. That could be incorrect, but I'm pretty certain of that. Now, in addition to that, there's a 3% processing fee and then a 20-cent fee per backer. Out of this amount that they raised, 5% of that is $12,033.75. Now, taking that additional processing fee, that is $7,220.75. And then for each backer, which they had 2,946, that is an additional $589.20. Total fees would rack up to nearly $20,000, $19,843.20. So that's why I think this additional 4 was there, because I don't believe it would have been as crazy. I did the math earlier, and I guess I took it down, so it must not be important, but it was what the 5% would have been. That would have been another $8,000, if I recall. So basically, this maybe a little discrepancy would have been a pretty decent cushion for them, is the gist of what I'm trying to get at. So their final total amount earned, once you factor all this out, is $220,831.80. And from what they were asking, $173,200. Once you factor those two things together, of what they were asking and what they took away, their final profit, or what I wouldn't even say profit, I put that just because in lack of a better term, their cushion of what they have to play with outside of that is $47,631.80.
And we each got $15. Oh, and a quarter. Don't forget the quarter.
Shut up, Arthur.
So because I'm not incredibly smart, what I didn't know was that the campaign was not over when I had done the first part of my video. And secondly, I didn't realize that the amount they had raised was under Canadian dollars. I thought it was USD on Kickstarter. So I had to change, basically, everything up here is still correct. It was these pieces down here, like the amount raised. So this is what I had originally had it in USD, so that was my misunderstanding. So all these numbers are still correct. These are the final numbers. Last updated, June 28, 2025 was the last day of the campaign. They raised $396,326 Canadian dollars, which roughly translates to $290,665.49, right? Kickstarter takes a percentage of every campaign, a 5% of every campaign, regardless of its success. So in this case, that breaks down to $14,533.27. There is a 3% payment processing fee for every successful campaign, $8,719.96. And they also take 20 cents per backer. Their final numbers for backers were 3,610 backers for that amount of money. So that's $722 that they will take from that as well. So total fees are $23,975.24. The final number that they earned was $266,690.25. And out of that, the profit they receive is $93,490.25. All these figures are in USD. This is the final number in Canadian dollars, so this is American money right here. I have no clue what they will do with this money. My guess is that they will make another music video with it, possibly 2. Their previous video, they did 2 music videos, and one of them was $80,000 in Canadian dollars. $60,000 on their previous music video. This is $93,000. Nearly $94,000. My bet is they'd do 1 or 2 videos off of that. That's what my guess as to where that extra money will go. I cannot guarantee that's what they'll do, but
why don't we just wait here for a little while? See what happens.
An element of these announcements that I find interesting that a lot of people are talking about, but they're not addressing in this particular way that I'm going to address it, is the announcement of their new drummer, Spencer Moore, who comes from the band Inferi. Fun fact, I have shared the stage with Inferi. They're a very talented band. Anything I'm about to say is not a criticism of Spencer's abilities. So Spencer Moore replaced Spencer Pruitt on drums, which is kind of nice. A lot of people are saying, oh good, now I don't have to remember names. So that's kind of handy. What I find interesting is the fact that Archspire put out this giant campaign to essentially just find a new drummer through the internet. So they had all these playthrough videos and what are essentially applications for these drummers from all across the internet. You had Kevin Parody, formerly of Benighted, lost his gig with Benighted because of the video. That's his claim. And then you had John Langstreth from Origin as well. Some really heavy hitters in the scene. So the decision to choose Spencer Moore, who is, by all accounts, a great drummer. I'm not going to deny that fact whatsoever. Kind of rubbed me the wrong way, considering that Archspire are very close friends with Inferi and have toured with them on numerous occasions. I will attempt to put all the ones I can find here in the video. After all of that, after that giant campaign where you probably had, I don't know how many videos, I saw quite a few. I would wager to say no less than 100 drummers applied to that video for that gig, right? And then at the end of it all, just to pick some your friend that you've toured with for years, that one was probably the most questionable decision out of any of these from an optical standpoint. Now, I don't think they really thought about that when they made the announcement, and I'm not saying it's like this malicious decision. Obviously, I don't think that's the case. I just thought that it was it's at its worst, it can be viewed as disrespectful to all the other people who applied. However, I'm not in the band. I'm not even talented enough to have applied to be in the band. I'm a big guy. I can't play that stuff. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm not at the ability as a drummer to even like touch that. For a lot of people to have put in all that hard work and then for them to kind of ultimately shot down by somebody who's already, right next to them, it's kind of, I could see that kind of coming off in a bad light. Anyways, if you really like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. And hit that notification bell for any future videos, and I will see you in the next one. Stay metal, and God bless.